Hi guys, good afternoon and welcome to another webinar brought to you by Australian Pacific College and English Unlimited. Well, this one, I suppose, Australian Pacific College. My name's Robbie Keswick. I'm the campus manager here in Sydney for Australian Pacific College and English Unlimited. And this is part of a series of webinars and masterclasses that we've been bringing to you over the last few months. We've done English, we've done design, we've done tax in Australia, we've done farm work. And today we are focusing on design. The masterclass is Design a Killer Magazine Cover in InDesign. So you're in for a real treat today, because in the diploma and the advanced diploma of graphic design that we offer here at Australian Pacific College, there are three main pieces of software that are taught: InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. So we're looking at InDesign today. And the presenter is our very own Rachel Hawkins, who is the Assistant Academic Manager for design here. So she sort of oversees the design programs, and she's been a graphic designer for 15 years. So without further ado, I will invite her to pop her head up on the screen. Rachel.
Hi everyone, how are we today?
I hope they're definitely well. Now we're going to have a Q&A at the end, guys. So at the bottom of your screen, if you're watching in Zoom, there's a Q&A button. I encourage you at any time just to ask any questions. We'll get to them at the end. If you're watching on Facebook, then you can just ask in a comment and we'll find it, and we'll try and get to that before the end of the session as well. So I'll disappear and I'll hand it over to you, Rach.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Robbie. What an introduction. So welcome everyone. I'm really excited about today to give you some insights into how to use InDesign to do a magazine cover layout. We're going to talk about lots of different things, and I'm going to run you through how to design the actual cover. We're going to touch on how to set up a document, the grid, and how that affects how we design image selection, font selection, and then some graphic elements and effects. And then, as Robbie said, at the end of the session today, we'll take some questions. To get started, I thought we'd just run a little poll and see, what you guys know so far. So Robbie, if you don't mind, can you put up the poll? All right, so Robbie.
All right, so here's the question, guys. So there are two questions. Which category best describes you? So I'm interested in studying graphic design. I'm currently studying graphic design. I'm a graphic designer, or I just love design. So hopefully you fall into one of those categories. And the second question is, how experienced are you in InDesign? So I've never used InDesign before. I've used InDesign, but I want to learn more. Or I'm experienced using InDesign. So maybe, if you're a graphic designer, you've used it before. So those are the questions. We'll give you another 10 seconds to get your answer in. It's an interesting mix of responses. It looks like a lot of you will have some stuff to learn about InDesign today. So I'll just end the poll.
How interesting. Wow. I love watching the figures jump around as you guys enter them. Great to see that there's so many of you here interested in studying graphic design, but also fantastic to see that some of you have a little bit of experience using InDesign, and we can definitely build on that today. But for those of you that have never used it before, I'm going to try and really go step by step, and yeah, hopefully everybody learns something and can walk away with some new skills. All right, so on that note, I think we can get into it and start looking at InDesign. So here we go. So in preparation for today, I've put together this magazine layout, which is what we're going to be putting together as we go through step by step today. And I'll be talking about all the different things I listed a little bit earlier, and be asking you to give me some input along the way. And but saving big questions for the end. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to learn how to set up a new document in InDesign. We do that by going to File, New. All right, and then you've got heaps and heaps of options here. We can go over to print because we're looking at doing a print document. I like to set everything up in millimeters because that's an Australian standard. And today we're going to go with the dimensions of 210 by 275. Now the reason is because that is a standard measurement for a magazine cover in Australia. Other common sizes are the US letter size, which is 8.5 by 11, which equates to about 220 by 280 millimeters. So not that different from what we're using today. The other thing we're going to do while we're here is select that it's a portrait page, and we don't want the pages to be facing at the moment. We're just going to do the cover today. And then we're going to go down to bleed. What bleed is the area around the page. So we want our cover to be full bleed and for our image to print over the page. So we need to add bleed. So that's our setup there. That's what our page is going to look at. And we can just call that magazine cover and say create. And here is our beautiful page ready to go. So next, we are going to set up the grid. The grid's going to help us to keep the page nice and neat in case we, want to know where we're going to place things, keep things quite organized and aligned. Okay, I do this by going up to layout and saying create guides. In create guides, I'm able to create rows and columns, and I'm able to fit those to the margins or to the page. I'm going to choose to keep them to the margins. I think that it looks a bit nicer when you set up the page. And I'm going to do 4 columns and 4 rows, just for a loose grid. And you can see those popping in behind, and I press OK. So now we have our basic page set up and our basic grid ready to go, so we can get started. So the next step, and we'll go over to one that I prepared a little bit earlier, the first thing we're going to do is talk about image selection and place our image. So when we're looking for images, we can use original photography, or we can use images sourced from a stock library. So I'll get you guys to use the chat and let me know, have any of you used any stock libraries before, and which ones have you used? See if any answers pop through. Pixels.com. Excellent. So some of the ones where you pay for them is iStock Photo, Shutterstock, Deposit Photos, Unsplash, yes, Getty Images, fantastic guys. So most of these you're paying to download the image, which gives you a license to use it. But as a graphic designer starting out, or a free pick, excellent. As a designer using images while you're studying, if you want to use something that's a free image, or you've got a client with a low budget, one of the sites I like to use is Pixabay. Now, the reason I like to use Pixabay is because you've got access to free images that are royalty free. What that means is you can use those images for commercial use without having to attribute them. What is attribution? Attribution is having to name the original photographer on the work, which makes your work look ugly. I don't really like doing it. I'd prefer a royalty-free stock image. So Pixabay is a great one to use. You can also do an easy search. I'll just put in here fashion model, and you're going to come up with a whole bunch of easy to download images, royalty-free for commercial use. So if I flick back over to InDesign, I selected a few images a little bit earlier that we're going to use today. And I'm going to place them by going to File, Place. You can also use the shortcuts. Okay, and here I have my images that I selected earlier. Now, when I'm selecting an image, I like to look at the positive and the negative space of the image and look at what's in the foreground and what's in the background, because that's going to impact how I use the image and how I put type and headings and other graphic elements on top of the image. So in this particular image, you can see that there's a lot of background, and it's a nice soft background, which is not too busy, which is going to be nice creating the magazine cover today. One of the other images I've chosen is this one. I thought that, again, it's got a lot of space around for us to work with. It's got some interesting contrast, which will work well in a magazine cover. And one last image. Again, you can see what I'm looking for. It's to have something interesting going on in the image, but also lots of space around it for going over the bleed and allowing us space to put text. So I'm going to select our first image here of this beautiful young lady, and I'm going to click and drag over the boundary. So I'm going to go all the way over the bleed as far as I can, keeping the image in the right proportion. I'm then going to click and drag the bounding box down, and then see how this, when I hover over, we get this little button or disc. I'm going to click on this one, which allows me a different bounding box. So it's the actual asset, the image, and I'm going to resize it. Now, I don't want to mess with the proportion of the image, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key, which is going to keep it in proportion. And then I can extend it down and adjust the size of her on the page. I can also use my arrows across to adjust the image position. So I'm pretty happy with the positioning of this image now. And, you know, we can tweak it a little bit later, but for now, that's looking quite nice, going towards our final outcome that we were looking at. The next step that we're going to look at is font selection. So font selection and accessing fonts is similar to that of selecting an image. So I'm going to ask you again, guys, put it in the chat. Has anyone downloaded a font before, and where did you download the font from? So there's lots of paid ones. Are there any paid ones you've used or free ones that you've accessed? Adobe Fonts someone has put in, that's a good one. My Fonts has a great, a very diverse library of fonts. Someone's popped in DaFont. Now, DaFont is a great one. It's one of the ones I was going to speak about today. DaFont is a great resource and has heaps and heaps of fonts, as you can see here. However, the problem with DaFont.com is most of the fonts only give you a license for personal use. If you're using it for commercial use, like for a paid client, you're going to need to pay for the rights to use that font. However, if it's just for student work or portfolio work, then you're absolutely able to use DaFont fonts. Now, I've also had here someone put Google Fonts, and I'm really happy you have, because Google Fonts is what we're using today. So Google Fonts is a great place to get your fonts from, mainly because you can get a royalty-free license here. So free for commercial use. That's the best thing about it. Heaps of fonts, easy to search, lots of information about them. For instance, this font Roboto, you can download the family here. If you want to know about the license, you just click here, and there you go. You can use them freely for products and projects, commercial or otherwise, but you can't sell the fonts, and that's fine, because we just want to use them for paid work or for student work or for whatever project we happen to be working on. So a little earlier, I did a bit of a search and I chose 3 fonts that are going to work well for us for our magazine cover. So the 3 fonts that I've chosen are Playfair Display, Roboto, which is a sans serif, and Allura, which is a script. Now, with fonts, Mario Garcia, who's a very famous Cuban-American newspaper and magazine designer, stated that you should choose at least a 3-font combination of a sans serif and a serif font. And so that's what I've done here today. But I've also tried to choose fonts that evoke some emotion and have a bit of diversity in them, have a few different variations that give us flexibility. And you'll start to see that as we work through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start using our first bit of typography here by putting in the magazine cover name. Now, guys, let's have a little bit of fun with this as I select the font. Does anybody have a different name for the magazine? If you put your hand up, we can unmute you and you can shout out a cover name for this magazine. Don't be shy, anything's fine. We're just going to have a little bit of fun with it. Or you can pop it in the chat as well if you're a bit shy. Have a little think, you can let me know, otherwise I'll just keep going with urban myth. So what I'm doing is I'm using my character panel over here, which is a tab in my workspace. And I'm using my arrows now to push it up and adjust its location. And I'm adjusting the size of the text here, and I'm just having a little play, moving things around a little bit till I'm happy with them. So I've used Playfair Bold. Okay, the next step is to, I'm going to just play with I've been playing with the spacing between the characters here so I can make the type a little bit bigger. And that space between the letters or the characters is called kerning. So that's just something, a little tidbit to know. Also, I'll just mention, you might be wondering how I got all my tools here on the side and my tabs that I'm using. So you get those by going to Window and selecting whichever tab you want is. So type and tables, I've been using character right at the moment, okay? You can also use an essential workspace. I've got my own programmed, but an essential workplace, which will give you most of the basic tool panels that you need. All right, did anybody have a think about a new title for the magazine? If not, maybe think about a fun headline. Again, you can put your hand up and let me know a fun headline that you would like to recommend. All right, so we've got Urban Myth, that's in our Playfair display font. I'm going to start adding a bit more typography in now. So I'm going to use our script font next. And the script font was called Allura. Once again, these are all sourced from Google Fonts. So I go to my character tab here, Allura. Okay, now this one's quite small, so I'm going to just up the size of that. I've used the plus sign as a nice graphic element. Okay, you can see I've gotten a little red cross in the bounding box there. That's just because I've gone a lot bigger. And I can drag it across so that we can see it all now. Okay, there it is. So that's our display font, and that's looking really, really nice. One of the other little tricks I can do is I can play with the font. So I can go and select one letter and then go into glyphs. And in glyphs, it shows you all the characters that are available in the font, so that you can select them individually. And I'm hoping there's a nice L here that's a bit more special that I can use, like this one here. And I swap it out, it's got a little extra bit on the top of it, it's a little bit pretty, or I can swap it for this one here, just a little bit, adding a bit more of a graphic element. So that's just something fun you can look at for each different font. Then I can bring across one of the other bits of typography here, and here I'm going to utilize the font Roboto. So this is our sans serif font. It's a bit more of an athletic font. And you can see here now we start to get a bit of character to the page because we're using that combination of different fonts that evoke different sorts of emotions. Did anybody think about a good new headline that they'd like me to try and pop in here? If not, I'll just keep going. So again, Playfair. So you can see that Playfair, the font has 6 variations. Okay, so there's a little bit of flexibility here with this font as to the different ways you can use it. Hope I'm not moving too fast for you guys, but clicking around, I found when I was learning the software was really, really helpful to learn how to use it. So here I've just gone into the color palette and now started to change the color a little bit on some of the font that we're using. I'm also here with this one going to adjust the leading. So back into my character tab here, the leading is the vertical space between lines for adjusting type, and I can do that here by just making it a little bit less. So it comes with an auto setting. So you can see for 29 point type, it was 34.8, and I can just decrease that until visually it looks how I want it to look. You'll find that in magazine design, it's quite typical that the type is tighter and closer together because they're trying to make the most of the space and jam pack as much information as possible. Might make that one just a little bit bigger for some emphasis. When I make that bigger, I have to adjust the line spacing. It's again, the leading. Okay. Over here, I've brought in this next bit of type. Now it's left aligned currently. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see, but because I'm putting it on the other side of my page, I'm going to use my paragraph tab and I'm going to change it to be right aligned. I'm going to make this part a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to select my font again. So there's no right or wrong order to go through all the steps. It's just a matter of having some fun, having a play and adjusting things as you need and fine-tuning them as you need. So I usually find a good approach is to get everything on the page first, get to a point where you're really happy with it, and then you can fine-tune it. All right, and how about I add this bit here? We're getting there, we're getting closer, and then we'll move on to some color. So here I'm going to use a combination of fonts in this box. I'm going to go with Playfair for that bit, and for this bit I'm going to go with Roboto. I can type it correctly, and I'm going to go with Roboto Black here because I want this bit to be really big and bold. So I'm using this plus sign as a graphic element in this case. Pull that over so it's a bit tighter in the visual grid that we've created. Okay, and then I'm going to pop this bit in here. So we've got most of our type on the page. I'll stop after this one because I think you guys get the point of how I'm going about getting all the information on the page. All right. And I think it's starting to have a bit of character and look quite good. Oops, might just make that one a little bit smaller, little bit of fine tuning here. All right, now you can see this little red box again. It just means that there's something else there that I was missing or hiding because I made it a bit bigger. Okay, so the next thing we're going to move on to is color palette. So with the color palette, I like to be driven sometimes by what's in the with the going on in the image, maybe being inspired by some of the colors in the image, Or another alternative is to look on Google and just type in color swatches and start having a look at different color combinations that you like, any colors that you think will look good in your design. And then you can bring them into InDesign and use your color dropper to select that color. So you can see here, I brought some colors in to my document that I'm using, and I created them into swatches. And I do that just by selecting the color or using the eyedropper, selecting a color from an image or a color palette, and clicking on this little plus sign here, and that will create a new swatch for you to use. And that's how I created these ones that I'm going to use today. So my first step is I'm going to select the type, and I'm going to double click. So I just selected the box and I double clicked on the type, and then I can go to edit, select all, or you can use your shortcut and make sure that the big T is in the front here and select the color. I'm going to come down here and select these ones, and I'm going to make these ones yellow. And this is really just playing. You can adjust this as you go. I think that this one down here, I might try in teal. Can have a bit of a play with it as you go. And then Layla down here. Does anyone want to rename Layla? Let me know if you've got a better name for Layla in the chat and we can give her a new name. I just made that name up. Okay, and we've got Layla there. Now, looking at Layla, this one, it's not really having the punch that I want it to have. This font's a little bit skinny, but it doesn't have a variation. This display font only had a single variation. So what I'm going to do is to create a bolder version of it is if I go up to swatches, here I have this, the color of the font is this coral color, but I can make the outline of the text also coral, and it makes it a little bit bolder, gives it a bit more weight. And I like how that looks a bit better. I'm also going to give this bit of type some rotation. I do that by going up here to this little rotation icon and rotating it like that. I could have also gone over the edge of the bounding box and gotten these little curvy arrows and done it manually, but I think you get more control when you do it up here and you can actually put in the degrees. Little bit more control, little bit more accurate. Whoops, wrong one there. Okay, and it's starting to look really more like the magazine cover we advertised, which is really exciting. I can also scale my type if I don't want to go back into the character panel by just adjusting it in the percentage here and clicking up. All right. So once we adjust our colorway, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was, oops, I've done that again incorrectly. Here we go. Make sure that the fill T is at the front. Is legibility of typography is really important, and also the hierarchy. So when we talk about the hierarchy of type and we talk about legibility, what we're looking at is how easy it is to read the type with the background behind it, and how your eye moves around a page, whether everything's easy to read, whether you can tell what the main heading is from other content on the page. So when we're doing this, some of the things we need to consider when we're looking at it is how well you can read it. So this little bit here is starting to get a little bit hard to read because of the background behind it. So one of the things we can do is apply an effect of a drop shadow. This drop shadow is going to make it a little bit easier to read because it's going to put some darkness behind it. So I'm just going to decrease the opacity to 55. So there you can see now it's a little bit easier to read because there's something behind it giving it some contrast from its background. So these are the ways you can play with the text just a little bit to have it work for you a little bit better. It also gives the design a little bit more character. Okay, so one of the last things I'm going to do here is to look at some of the trends in magazine design. And one of the things that you'll often see is that the graphic designer has a bit of a play with foreground and background and where the image sits. So sometimes you'll see that the image will sit in front of the title, and that can look quite good. It looks really professional, it's visually interesting. And so what I did a little bit earlier is I prepared an image of this girl, but I'd already cut out her background just ever so roughly, and we're going to pop it over the top. So what I'm going to do is to get the same size, I'm just going to go to edit, copy, and then paste with the main image so that she's in the same position. I might just double check that she has actually landed in that same position there. It looks like she moved over just ever so slightly. Okay, and then I'm going to, while that bounding box is still selected, go to File, Place, and I'm going to select the one that I prepared earlier. So you can see here, I cut her out quite roughly, just enough because she's going on the same background behind her. So it won't be that visible, but it's gonna mean that her hat's gonna be in front of the title now, which is gonna look quite nice. So let's pop her in there now. And we'll just send her back just a little bit. So I'm just using the tool, the shortcut for send backwards. And there we go. So the beautiful thing about the brain is if we can see part of the letters, the brain fills in the rest. So we're still able to read the title somewhat because our brain is able to recognize the word and recognize letters and read it, even though some of it's obscured. So there we go. There is our cover, and I think it looks pretty cool. Now, the great thing about this cover is that once you've got that basic format, you can play with different images as well and move things around. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy down the design we've done. Okay, I'm going to just delete that extra image there for a second, and I'm going to pop in some other images that I selected earlier so you can see what it looks like when we change the image out. So again, I select the image bounding box. I'm going to go down to, oh, I've lost it, I'm in the wrong one, down to File, Place, and I'm going to select a couple of the other images that I chose. So here's another one. I can select just the actual asset rather than the bounding box, hold the Shift key to adjust it. And let's see what our same magazine cover looks like now that we've changed the image. So it still looks quite nice. And just a last example, using shortcuts now. Can see here I'm on a preview mode now, so it's a little less busy to the eye when you're trying to look at your finished work. And I like to switch between a working mode and a preview mode when I'm working in InDesign. And I'm just doing that down the bottom here. Okay, and so that's really it for today. I hope this has been useful and helpful and that you've learned something new about how to use InDesign in more ways than just for a magazine layout. And I think I'll pass back over to Robbie now to show you a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know nothing about design. So, I mean, you're the expert here. I just learned so much in half an hour. We kind of went through the process a little bit quickly, I think. And we're going to have this YouTube video up on the YouTube channel, and we'll put a link in the chat. We're going to have that up hopefully by the end of tomorrow. So if you'd like to go back and revisit some of the steps, then you can do that. I encourage you to put questions in the Q&A, so down the bottom of the screen if you are watching along in Zoom, or just comment if you're watching on Facebook. Yeah, so I think we'll have our final poll for the day. Actually, before we get there, we'll I do need to go through this information too. So at Australian Pacific College, we have graphic design, we have a diploma, and we have an advanced diploma. Right now, design courses are $1,500 per term. Right now, it's COVID-19 fee relief. So obviously, because we're living through this difficult situation at the moment, the fees are normally $2,500 a term, but have come down in most campuses, but have come down for study in term 4 next year. Term 4 this year, I should say. And so that applies to all the graphic design courses. We have interior design as well. So yeah, that's the information for those of you who are interested in studying. And there's a link in the chat as well that we'll put there again. So if you'd like more information about the courses, you can just follow that link and it'll take you straight there. And so now let's go to the Q&A. Let's go some of these questions, Rachel, that you will be able to answer, and I definitely won't. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the first question is, could you just quickly go over again the process for cutting the image of the girl in Photoshop so you could put her behind or in front of the text? Can you just sort of explain that again?
Yeah, sure. So the process is called deep etching. Now, in Photoshop, that's a whole process in its own. And if you guys are really interested in it, then I'll have to just run another webinar specifically on showing you how to do that in Photoshop, because it is a bit long-winded and there's a few different ways of doing it.
Beautiful. I might hold you to your word on so it's called deep etching. That's the process.
Deep etching, yeah. Deep etching is the graphics term for cutting around an object. So that might be a model in a photograph, or that might be an object on a page like a product or a piece of jewelry that you're using for a brochure or a lookbook or anything like that.
I've got a great question here from Sandra. Sandra, I would say Sandra, maybe Sandra, I don't know. My pronunciation is terrible. All right, so what are some key things I'll need to check if something's not working for me, but I'm not sure what it is? Like I'm looking at my magazine cover, say, and something's wrong and I don't know what it is. What sort of things should I be looking at to check?
Yeah, sure. So I would be looking at the balance. I would be looking at if something's too big and something's too small. So when I look at a layout or a piece of art and I look at composition, what I want to sort of analyze is that when I look at the piece of work, where does my eye go first? And then how does my eye travel around the page? So if my eye continuously moves around and I never land on one particular thing, I just keep moving around the page in a nice either circular manner or doing diagonals, it doesn't really matter which direction you go. But if your eye can continuously move, that's a positive sign. If you keep arriving at the same point and then you can't move to the next point from there, maybe that's the point that you need to look at and reshuffle things and adjust, because that might be the particular part of it that's a block. The other thing I would say is graphic design, any sort of design, it's really collaborative. Ask for feedback for friends. And my last tip, because I could talk about this all day, is I often copy and paste pages down. So like I did just quickly at the end there, copy it down, try a new combination, a new layout, a new configuration, and then copy another one down, and then look at 3 or 4 of them and see which one you like best. And save, always save. I didn't save during that session. I can't emphasize that enough.
Always save is probably excellent advice for anything you do on a computer, not just graphic design. Next one, so we talked quickly about the different pieces of software that we use or that you teach in the graphic design program. What's the main difference? I think everyone has a good idea of what Photoshop does. What's the main difference between Illustrator and InDesign?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Illustrator is focused on vector art and illustration, as the name suggests. So Illustrator is great when you want to use lots of gradients, when you want to work in vector, which means that the artwork can be scaled to massive billboards or scalable logos for big signage. But it's not great at doing multi-page layouts. So if it's just for a poster, then it's fantastic. However, if you're doing multi-page layouts or a brochure where you're going beyond 2 or 3 pages, InDesign is much better because you have more control over the configuration of pages and putting those in a particular sequence, setting them up for the print requirements, and reshuffling things, doing page numbering, all those sorts of publishing aspects.
All right, I've got a question here from Pablo, who looks like might be interested in joining us at APC. What is the difference between the diploma and the advanced diploma? Like maybe if you've got some experience, like what's the progression in terms of what you learn?
Yeah, sure. So the diploma goes through more basic skills and software. I will note that the diploma has an entry requirement. So we do expect that you've sort of dabbled in creative aspects of putting together some bits and bobs prior to coming to the diploma, but we definitely start from the beginning when it comes to the software. So you're learning the basic software, you're starting to work with design briefs, getting an understanding of the elements and principles of design, and different aspects of the different sorts of things you might have to design in your design career. So 2D pieces of work, 3D pieces of work, looking at understanding what's going to appeal to a market when they're looking at it visually from a marketing perspective. When you get to the advanced diploma, we're extending those skills. So we're really demanding that you produce work at a more professional level that industry is going to class as meeting the industry expectation of what you see around you, which is done by professionals.
We've got one question here from Katerina. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly again, but I hope that's okay. How easy, she said how easy, she's very confident. How easy maybe, or how difficult is it to get an internship in design in Australia?
Yeah, look, it all comes down to, I guess, your portfolio and how you present yourself. It's just like finding any other type of job. So when we talk about work placements, there's no reason a work placement has to be unpaid. So they can be paid or unpaid. That's really up to the individual and the host organization when you're going into that relationship. If you're looking for an unpaid internship, it's obviously going to be a lot easier to find an opportunity. It does depend on your location as well. If you're in a big city, then there are going to be lots of opportunities. So I will add, it's a great opportunity for me to add that our advanced diplomas do include a work placement. That it's a very industry connected qualification. And while we ask individuals to try and seek out their own work placements for the purpose of finding something that might get you a job at the end of it, something that suits your interest, the college will be able to assist you in finding an internship in the advanced diploma.
There you go. All right. So I'll just touch on again. So it's 1,500 for the coming term, and the next intake date is October the 12th, which is not that far away. So if you are interested, maybe you're in Australia and you're interested in extending your studies, that's what's coming up very, very soon. So you can follow the link now. It's in the chat. See join.apc.edu.au/design. So that's in the chat there if you're watching along on Zoom. Otherwise, Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. And so yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And I really hope today was really, really helpful for all of you. And I had just a couple last questions for you all, just to so I can improve it in the future, to see if it was useful.
Yep, so we'll just run the last poll now. There you go. So if you're still with us, one final poll. Was this webinar useful? Yes, I learned so much. I learned a few things, or no, it wasn't useful. And also, if you could rate the webinar out of 5. So you should be able to see that on your screen now. How much did you learn? Hopefully a lot. So it looks like people learned a lot. That's very nice. People are very kind.
Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. All right. So a very quick question I just saw come in through the chat from Sarah. Will this be online? Yes, it will be on the YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow. You're also going to get an email, not just with the video, but all the assets from today, Rachel. That's right.
That's correct. So I'm going to share with you guys the links to all the assets I used today and the actual InDesign file as well, so that you can have a play around with how I formatted things, and because sometimes you can learn a lot from somebody else's file setup. So I hope that's really helpful to you guys.
All right, beautiful. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming. That's the end. We'll do our Zoom wave. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Any other questions, get in touch with us any way you like on Facebook, live chat at apc.edu.au, or you can drop us a line here. We'll keep it open for a couple more minutes. Thanks a lot. See ya.